Yeah.
She's talking about the cabinetry of the AST test.
Oh, IoT, internet, mobile, cloud, what does it all mean? Oh, you mean, you see most of you, right? It's quite overwhelming. So I say here, are you having fun and does it all make sense? It probably does. This is the next kind of iteration where we can deliver not only light, but also power through the IT network to change how we think about lighting. And all this stuff gets managed in the cloud, so we can kind of much more efficiently operate these assets. And the purpose of it is that we can increase the experiences and reduce our operating costs and deliver new outcomes. So this is what's happening in our industry. I would argue, if you like it or not, this train has left the station. The disadvantage of our industry is historically, all the system that goes in our buildings have been rather siloed or proprietary. They haven't necessarily meant or been designed to talk to one another or to integrate over one infrastructure. So this is the world we have, but I'm here to argue that maybe this is the world we will have or should have, where all these systems now can freely communicate with one another because they leverage this digital infrastructure I just mentioned as the plumbing for business and industry transformation. And add now power to this infrastructure so I can now deliver power up to 100 watts per port, IT port, through this network. So now I can power every light bulb, every VAV controller, every wireless access point, every door lock through an IT infrastructure that historically we weren't able to do. Now you're going to say, oh, way too risky. It's IT. People are going to hack this and break it. And you're probably not wrong. Frankly, it's already happening. And some of the largest credit card thefts with large US retailers have happened because some hacker found its way through a non-secure HVAC system and got onto a corporate network and was able to steal some stuff. So we need to apply the same security rules that IT has been accustomed to for decades to the construction and real estate sector.
The first one, how come after I don't get a straight answer from you? And the second most common question is, how come I got to pay for that? Well, today I'm going to answer both of those questions for you if I can. I'm not an engineer or architect, but I know, of course, that an object under stress increases its strength, and so the cables were designed to be put through the concrete flooring of the parking garage and put under tension. And then they could use less concrete and it would make the building stronger, and it was the latest thing in the latest design. Hydrous oxide. Ottawa is a cold city. They get a lot of snow and they put a lot of salt on those roads to clear that ice and snow. And of course, over time, that parking garage, because concrete is porous and it's not waterproof, the water and salt got through to the cables and rusted them, and the parking garage had to be taken down at a great cost, and a new one rebuilt, and the parking garage wasn't anywhere near its lifespan. And so Bell Canada, which was then and may still be certainly one of the top 10, the largest company in Canada, sued Olympia in York, one of the largest developers in Canada, certainly at that time, went on so long, more than a year, multiple experts, that the trial counsel involved in the case took out life insurance on the trial judge because they were concerned that if he should pass away, that they would have to redo the whole trial, and they'd invested millions in it. So you can imagine being halfway through a trial, going to the judge and saying, Your Honor, I spoke with our counsel. Would you mind if we put a life insurance policy on you and with us as the beneficiaries? The trial judgment actually is long as the trial. It's actually a book in itself, but here's my favorite quotation from that judgment. An engineer was being cross-examined rigorously by a counsel I've actually had cases with. And the question was, were you aware before your examination for discovery in 1985 that you were going to be clearly questioned about these tendons? And the engineer says, oh, in all my life, except once, you know, he's struggling for words. And of course, this is justice and I think it's great, but I must say, I never had any idea in my life that you could ask so many questions for so long about so little. Now, Bell Canada won. The judge went through the whole thing. They were suing for millions of dollars, and they won, as I recall, about $20,000, right? But of course, there was something called an offer to settle from Olympia in York that was better than that, and so actually Bell, yeah, they won the $20,000, but they ended up paying all of their own costs and all of Olympia in York's costs for the conduct of that trial. So they won the classic Pyrrhic victory, just to connect the Venn diagrams again.
So I called this the new Construction Act. There's been rumblings about it for a time. It is the first major overhaul of the Construction Lien Act since the 1980s, when it was called the Construction Lien Act. Generally speaking, it extends the time period to register and perfect construction liens. It allows for some more flexibility for retaining and paying holdback. With respect to contractors, the Act imposes specific accounting obligations for those holding trust funds. And basically, when you're in the construction chain, virtually every dollar you receive on a project is a trust fund until everyone's paid. There is the implementation of this prompt payment regime, problem of payment disputes between, primarily between contractors and subtrades. As a corollary to that, the introduction of something called interim adjudication, which is essentially a mechanism to try to resolve disputes on an interim basis on a construction job with essentially an independent adjudicator, so that parties don't down their tools over payment disputes and trades don't walk off a job. Part of the amendments are already in force. Generally, those are the parts dealing with the expanded lien rights and the changes to the holdback payments. And then in October of this year, the prompt payment mechanisms and interim adjudication is going to kick in. There are transition provisions as well, which are frankly a bit mind-boggling. They make sense, and yet they're problematic in another sense. But basically, what the transition provisions mean is that if parties entered into a contract on or before July 1, 2018, the old legislation will apply. And that's fine. That makes sense. The second part is that even if you have contracts that were entered into after July 1, 2018, if there was a procurement process that was commenced before July 1, 2018, the old act will apply. The new act doesn't really define what procurement process means, but have clarified that it means a tender, an RFQ, an RFP. The last one is if the work is being done on leasehold premises and it's subject to a lease that was first entered into before July 1, 2018, the old act applies. This is the one that to me is particularly mind-boggling because you can have a 20-year lease. So this technically means premises. You may be dealing with interpreting the old act, which went out, which basically was obsolete on July 1st, 2018, except for leasehold premises. So this could generate a lot of confusion. In terms of lien rights, broadly speaking, the time for preserving a lien is now increased from 45 days to 60 days after last supply, or if you're a contractor, when you're done. There is the deadline to perfecting a lien, and that's really just issuing a claim. and registering and get its title, that's extended to 150 days. The idea is to give parties more time to talk. It makes sense that the timelines were pretty tight previously. Basically, hold back obligations for landlords if the work is funded in whole or in part by the landlord by way of tenant inducements. Yet it can be a little bit confusing because sometimes the tenant inducements aren't tied to whether or not construction takes place, so I'm not sure if the landlord will have holdback obligations. This is all brand new, so as lawyers and in the industry, a lot of the sort of gaps will probably have to be filled in either by regulation later on or by the judges just making up their minds about how to fill in the gaps about this legislation. The Act now specifically allows for other forms of security, letter of credits, bonds. The old Construction Lien Act strangely had permissive language as to when parties could release it, but it didn't make it mandatory. Projects. There's now the Act now permits parties to actually agree to release holdback either on an annual basis or on a staged basis, as long as that's clearly defined. And of course, the payment of holdback is still subject to there being no registered liens or written notices of lien against title, so that's something that needs to be searched for. For contractors and all the way down the construction chain after that, the Act now requires that trust funds be deposited into a specific trust account. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't have to be a trust account for every single project, but it has to be a specific trust account. And trustees, meaning anyone who is in receipt of funds that are owed down the line, down the construction chain to subcontractors or subcontractors, are supposed to keep written records of all amounts paid into the trust account, amounts paid in and out. So a trust ledger. I'm not exactly sure. The Act doesn't completely define what are the consequences for someone who fails to do that, but that's what the Act now provides. Mandatory bonds for public contracts. In truth, this isn't a big change because virtually all public projects had bonding requirements previously, and it's typically always 50% labor and material payment bonds and performance bond. But now changes really start on October 1 with both the prompt payment and the interim adjudication process. So basically the Act now says that unless otherwise agreed, an owner has 28 days of receipt of a proper invoice. And there's a whole definition of what a proper invoice means. The Act also says that the parties can contract for a different period than 28 days, but this is the default. But an owner who takes the position that for some reason that invoice is not properly payable, they're disputing the invoice, they can't just not pay it in 28 days. They have to send what's known as a notice of non-payment to the contractor within 14 days of receipt of the invoices. And you know, this may cause an administrative headache to owners and developers, especially big jobs, construction management jobs, because you have an invoice from your construction manager with all the backup and it's this thick. Having to vet it in 14 days will require a lot of diligence on the part of owners and managers and consultants who might be asked to assist. Assuming there's no notice of non-payment and the contractor gets paid, they in turn have 7 days to pay their sub-trades. And it works the whole way down the construction chain. Even if an owner makes no payment, a contractor has 35 days after it sends the proper invoice to pay its subcontractors, unless it itself provides a notice of non-payment. So there's sort of all these notices that may go down the chain when people aren't getting paid. And essentially, if a contractor says that they're not being paid because the owner didn't pay them, they can't just rest on their laurels with their sub-trades. They themselves have an obligation to actually take the matter, their dispute with the owner, to interim adjudication. If a party fails to pay an amount due after non-payment is adjudicated, the party entitled to payment will be able to suspend the work or terminate the contract. So, interim adjudication. This will also, just like prompt payment, this will also apply to contracts and subcontracts entered into after October 1st. And initiating interim adjudication can also extend the lien rights in certain scenarios. So basically there's going to be this authorizing nominating authority that hasn't been constituted yet. Hopefully they will by October 1, but that will be the authority that persons request appoint an adjudicator. So the types of disputes are really about valuation of work provided. For payment disputes, this will include sort of disputed change orders and other non-payment disputes generally, including claims for set-off. Set-off is really simply, yes, I owe you the money for doing that, but you went and delayed things or you damaged something, so I don't really owe you because you owe me. Adjudicators are intended to have broad inquisitorial powers. So they will, unlike judges, the intention is there'll be less due process here for parties. But adjudicators will be able to ask questions. They'll be able to go and do a site visit if needed. The idea is that they're supposed to make their interim decision within 30 days of receiving requested documents from the parties. So the idea here is that, in theory, these interim adjudications will happen very quickly before parties' lien rights expire. And the adjudicator will be able to make a decision as to whether or not something is properly owing. And if it is properly owing, the idea is your owner will then be forced to pay that amount. Or if it's not properly owing, the contractor who was looking to be paid will be told, sorry, you're not actually entitled to that amount, but keep working. You're not entitled to all that.
Great. Where's the winner? Website.
The website?
Yeah,
CSC.
and it's a dedicated website. So and not only that, we also have all the documents virtually map the site. So all your drawings, everything you're now electronic. Designing for.
So one of these materials that you have?
And you can go on screen, if you want to measure on screen, you can actually take this mouse here and you can say, sorry, I keep hitting the bumper. So you can go on and measure on the screen. You need to measure rooms, you need to measure a window. We've had this running
Oh my God, so
20 years.
this is amazing. So everybody has
Maybe longer.
So where you are in the space, I would say which direction it goes. Always know. There's a compass involved as well, so if you want to change floors, I'm not sure is this multi-floor thing? Yeah, so you want to check the second floor. I haven't been exploring. You know, that's exploring. Yeah. So or you can change the floors within the floor as well. So you have a staircase. So you can navigate again, either just by identifying block space, or you can just jump right to the spot that you want to go to. So if you just want to say, go. See the room, these are labeled way, but if I just want to check out the room out, I can just jump over it and so you know a lot of that down.
So wouldn't that be great if this year's theme was hospitality?
I'll learn.
So whatever.
I would say what really sets us apart are connections to industry and opportunities to get involved within industry partners at George Brown is probably what differentiates our programs the most versus the other schools, as well as the quality of education and getting to hang out with